Hi, Amy. Welcome to the Genetic Genius podcast. I am so thrilled to have you as a guest today.
Hi, so great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun. I can't wait to dive deep into passion and purpose and hear about your new book.
Thank
Yay.
you.
Before we get started, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your story, how you got started on the path that you're on now and what your purpose is on the planet.
Yeah, for sure. So, my name is Amy. I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur. I have essentially three businesses that are all revolved around my passion. But before I go there, I'll just rewind a little bit and just let your audience know I didn't start off on the entrepreneurial journey. I actually started off teaching. I taught grade one for 10 years. And I loved it. And I liked it, but I didn't love it. And when it came towards the end of those 10 years, I found that I wasn't fulfilled. I write a lot about this in my book where I hit a point where I felt bad for wanting more and guilty for wanting more because I had a teaching job. And now in Canada, it's very different than in the US. In Canada, as a teacher, you're so well respected. I was getting paid $80,000 a year. I was making decent money as a teacher, had the summers off, had my pension, but I wasn't fulfilled. So then I ended up making the jump into the entrepreneur world, a lot based on really opening my eyes to self-development and thinking about possibility and other things that I could do. And then also my husband has always been in the entrepreneurial world. So he encouraged me and we worked together to move through that process. But I definitely didn't start out with three businesses and an entrepreneur. I didn't even have a book on my vision board. I was a teacher and that's where I was. But today, my three businesses revolve around three things. My first passion is giving back and impact. So I founded a nonprofit that I started with my husband called Village Impact. And we help bring education to Kenya through building schools. And we build these schools in partnership with the government. So I'm hugely a fan of community work and working together with other organizations, like learning from other organizations and learning from other cultures and just coming together and building amazing things. And that love for cultures and travel actually started when I was really young. I joke because I moved from the UK when I was 10. I don't sound like it now. Like here I am, 41. I moved a long time ago, but all my family is still in the UK. So I consider myself still British. I still have the passport. I'm still British and I'm Canadian. But the whole thread of giving back and having an impact was woven like into my body since I was little. Like I remember having strangers over at the Christmas time at the dinner table. My mom would be taking us to soup kitchens, to hospitals. Like we were always doing something as a family. And that kind of followed me through my travels in my 20s and then ended up creating Village Impact, what we have today. And then my second passion is all about experiences and getting out of our comfort zone. And this business called Lady Strength really came from me being not a disgruntled teacher, but like a teacher that's not fulfilled, wanting to get into the entrepreneurial space, married to a husband that's always been in the space and has all his network, had all his friends. And I'm like, I was lonely. And I'm like, okay, I need to start inviting girls or women over that have their own businesses or that have done things that I want to learn about. And I started with a free mastermind in my house, and that grew over years to now it's a paid mastermind where I run a year-long program for women entrepreneurs, but we combine that with adventure travel. So we combine that with getting out of our comfort zone and doing these experiences together while still masterminding about our businesses. So that's my second one. And then my third one and my newest one is I'm all into real estate. We've always been into real estate, but definitely into short-term rentals. We've gotten into in this last year. And so I opened my first luxury Airbnb. And again, it's all about experiences, but it's like another business. And that's all over. That didn't happen overnight. That's basically in a nutshell, my 12-year journey over the last little while.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of wonderful things, Amy, keeping yourself busy.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how you had time to write your book with all that, but we're going to dive into that and find out. Yeah. I know how it is. You make the time when it's your passion to write the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with your book, because I think that's, it's a fun place for us to lay that groundwork, as you've already talked about some of your passions. So your book, dun, dun, dun,
Yes.
dun, dun,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, from passion to purpose. So tell us your inspiration behind writing the book. I think you mentioned you was it on your vision board. When did
No.
it pop up there?
No, you know what? It's so funny because I didn't have that on my vision board. To be honest, my daughter, I didn't say this in the intro, but I'm a mom. I have a 10-year-old
Mm.
daughter and an 8-year-old little guy named Sam. And my daughter is an avid writer. She's probably more into writing than I am. But the inspiration for writing came actually from Reed Tracy, who is the CEO of Hay House, our
Mm.
publishing company. He was encouraging me to write this book for a few years, but I've always been like, no, I'm not ready. And
Right.
then finally, like, Stu and I are finally, well, before a couple of years ago now, because COVID and everything happened, I got to a point where I was getting a little, not frustrated, but the moment came for me because we were getting off stages where my husband and I would speak about our businesses and how we've interwoven giving back and charity into the businesses that we run now, and then talking about our nonprofit and how we're working as an organization to be community led and all this
Mm.
stuff. So we'd have a lot of people ask for us to speak on stage. Now,
Mhm.
this was definitely more my husband's thing because I don't, speaking on stage for me is terrifying, but I do it because it's an important message, right?
Right.
So we would get off the stages and people would come up to us and say, oh, I wish I had X, Y, Z, and I would do this,
Mm.
or I, I just don't have the time to start a nonprofit, or I wish I could do this, but I can't. And
Mhm.
it used to drive me crazy, and it still does, because I
Yeah.
really and truly believe that you don't have to start a nonprofit. You don't even have to start your own business to make an impact and leave your
Right.
legacy, like,
That's so true.
and have your purpose. Like, you don't, yes,
Mhm.
we live a crazy life with 5 businesses, a dog, and 2 kids, and that is our life. But you don't have to do that. And like, just that's our path and our journey and what we decided to take. But
Mhm.
anyone that is listening today, like, I just encourage you, you can make a difference today. Like, it's all in the little words that we say. It's the way we show up for our community, the way we show up for our family and friends. It's thinking about your business right from the beginning and how you can
Mhm.
interweave giving back into your business right from the beginning. Or it's joining a board of directors on a charity that has the same alignment with you, or the same values, or the same purpose.
Mhm.
Lots and lots out there that you can
Right. Yes.
jump on board with and be part in. You don't have to wait to have $100,000, $1,000, or even $1. Like, you can
Right.
start today and have an impact today. So
Mhm.
that's was the why behind getting the book out there for me, because I think what an amazing world we would live in if we could all use our passions and what we're really good at and what we really love to do, and then use them as a vehicle to do more good, or use them as your purpose, because your purpose is really your passion to do more good in the world.
I love that. And I love how much you emphasize the impact piece because it's
Yeah.
so important. And like you said, we don't have to have this massive pocketbook to make an impact. We could
No.
just be, even giving flowers around the neighborhood. I don't know, whatever it can be, whatever your impact
Yeah.
is.
We were walking the kids to school this morning, and there were some newspapers on the side of the road that they just drop off right at the end of the
Mhm.
driveway. And I'm like, oh, guys, go and get the papers as walking to school, and like just plop them on the person's porch. Like, it's like little things like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important, especially as a parent with 2 young ones at home, to
Mhm.
model these things and to show these things within your family and giving back, because it doesn't need to be a big thing.
Right. Yeah. And you can make the impact in tiny ways that can sometimes build up into a bigger way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you got inspired to write this beautiful book. Your passion became your purpose, or your purpose became your passion, both intertwined together.
Yeah.
And so I think like the great question for us to start with is like, how does a person like know what their passion? If they don't know what it is, how do they
Mhm.
find it? Is there like because I feel like that's like a part where I'm like, I don't even know what my passion is. How how do they go
Yeah.
back to their childhood and like you mentioned, things that are from their childhood that they love, or is there something, in your book that guides them that can help them to lay out some of those loves on the vision board, like you mentioned?
Yeah. It's funny. I find that particularly for when I talk to women my age, because I am like of this age where, a lot of women get to a point in their life where the kids are now in school and they're
Mhm.
like, where do I go from here? And so an activity that I've done with people in the past, and it's super simple, but the key is to actually do it and then use that and take the time, because a
Mhm.
lot of us are so guilty of saying, yeah, 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 yeah. And then you don't do it, right? You're not intentional about it. So what you can do is take a piece of paper and draw like a straight line and then literally go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and take a moment, go somewhere where no one's going to interrupt you and go down memory lane. Visit those times, like you were mentioned before, visit those times in your 20s and your 30s. What were
Mhm.
you doing at that time? And sometimes I think we forget some of the things we did in our 30s and our 20s and those things that we liked. And
Mhm.
then I encourage people to like circle just one or two of those things and then break it up even more and try and even sprinkle it on your calendar, because it's not about completely changing our life. It's not
Right.
about overhauling our life, because our life is not, it's about starting small. Like when I
Mhm.
shifted from teacher to entrepreneur,
Mhm.
that was like a 3-year shift for me, because I was
Right.
stuck with like some guilty thoughts. And then I got into self-development. And then there was a lot of work I did personally to,
Right.
move over that way. But you start sprinkling those things that you love to do back in, because I truly believe like when we're passionate about something and that brings out the
Mhm.
best version of us. You want your kids to be around the best version of you. You want your husband to be around the best version of you, or your spouse, your partner. So when I'm doing accounting, I'm really grumpy. And thank God, thank goodness for like good accountants. I could never do that.
Right. No,
But
me
like
either.
you
Agree.
want to do stuff that you love. So go back in time, take a look, and then
Mhm.
just take a class. Call a friend and see if a friend wants to do an activity with you. Just take the time to put it on your calendar just once. And if you're too scared to try something, then grab a friend. Like I said, grab a friend, because you don't have to do it alone. Like you can find a friend to come with you to do that. And
Yeah.
then if you can't find anything there that you think you will like anymore, then like go to the drawing board again and think about friends, contacts, mentors, people you follow on Instagram. Is there something that resonates there that you're like, oh, that's interesting? Oh,
Mhm.
maybe. And then just take a little bit of that and try and dabble it in. And you just got to try. You just got to get back onto it and put it back in your life by either getting it from the past or trying something completely new. But then I will say that just if you're back and looking in your 20s or 30s and you like something then and you try it and you don't like it now, that's okay too. Because
Right.
sometimes things that we love right in our 20s may not be right for in our 40s or
Right.
30s or 50s or whatever it may be. And
Mhm.
and that's okay. That's the beautiful thing about life. There's nothing set in concrete, but you have to take the intention and the step forward to putting it into your life. So definitely go back, look
Mm.
at something you did, or ask your friends too. A lot of times and I write about this in the book, where when I was traveling down the coast of India on a rickshaw, we had to get to a hotel every night. So we had to go 1,200 kilometers on this rickshaw, and we had to get to this destination. And I had two or three friends of my husband's friends reach out to him and say, I've never seen Amy so lit up. She is truly
Mhm.
like in her element. And
Yeah.
and I am like, when I do adventure crazy travel stuff, like that's my thing. And
Mhm.
other people see that. So asking your friends or people close to you, like, when do I light up? Like
Mm.
what do I talk about at a dinner party all night long? Or how many tabs? If you're like me and real estate being one of my passions,
Mhm.
I always have tabs open for the MLS or for searching for homes. What
Mhm.
tabs do you always have open? What tabs do you close?
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
We
that's a
don't do
good one.
that.
Totally.
Mhm.
I love that, Amy. And it's so interesting to have that timeline, right? Because as we're developing as children, those passions and love built in within our DNA. It's like part of our makeup or what our spark is, our light is. And finding that can sometimes be challenging, like you said, but I like the simplicity aspect of what you talked about. Just make the timeline, make it simple. And don't go stressing out about it. If you can't
No.
find it on there, try something new. Like you said, like,
Yeah.
what's sparking in your life now? Cause everything has changed in the past, whether you're, like you said,
Yes.
you're 20, 30, 40, whatever, your life has been changing. And so is the planet. So there could be different things that spark your interest.
Yeah, and it's a journey. And I think, like you said, it's embarking not as like, I have to find it and putting yourself on a
Right.
timeline and by this year, I'm going to find my passion. Like, I think you got to look at it like a journey and a fun adventure. It's like
Mhm.
finding yourself again or finding those things that light you up. Because the greatest thing is too, when you go to that spot or you find those people that are doing similar things, the connection that you make with those people are phenomenal. Like my traveling girlfriends, like we have so much in common because we're very aligned in what we choose to go for, what our passions are.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And traveling is so fun. I also have a passion for that and love it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So in your book, when you're talk about what it means to turn like a passion into a purpose. Okay, we talked about like you're
Mhm.
finding your passion, or maybe you already know what it is. But how
Yeah.
do you make that into a purpose, or why? What's the purpose of making it into a
Yeah.
purpose?
Yeah. I think it's you can keep it pretty simple if you want, or you could make it bigger. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like
Hmm.
when I think of my journey and giving back and helping people and working with the community, I could have stayed and volunteered in organizations or done this, but I felt so drawn to it that I wanted to create something bigger. So the
Hmm.
passion for giving back then became our nonprofit. But if
Right.
you a painter, for example, and your love is painting,
Hmm.
and you love painting with pastels and doing these
Hmm.
drawings, how you can share and have an impact and make a purpose with that is, I think, is there classes you could offer that are free or of no charge, but you just
Right.
get to connect with other people and talk about how you feel as you're creating the art. And I know there's a couple of women in my mastermind that have journaling activities with their art. And it
Mm,
goes beyond just the image, it goes into the inner self. And they talk about expressing yourself through art and things like this. So
yeah.
it's using what you love to do, but then giving it as a gift to other people.
Mm,
Can you give that gift of art as a free class? Or maybe it's you putting it out on Facebook and just sharing it because
right.
someone's going to watch that and then they might have a connection with it and then they take it somewhere else. It's like all these ripple effects, right?
Mm,
And because
mhm.
no purpose or impact is too small or too big. And just by being an artist and sharing your true passion and love for drawing these photos or drawing these paintings and putting it out there and offering a free class, or there's one of Stu's clients is I think is an artist or someone who's really good at drawing. And
Mhm.
once a month, she goes to an old age home or to a retirement home and she does art with these retired
Oh,
folk,
wow.
right? And they
Mhm.
love it. And that's
Yeah.
impact. Like you are changing these elderly folks' life. They look forward to this lady coming in every month to share her passion. And by
Yeah.
her sharing her passion, she's having an impact. So it's really just looking at different ways of what you're doing today and how you can pay it forward in
Mm,
simple ways. Like it
right.
doesn't be giving everything away for free that you do, but is there something
Right.
that you shop once a month, or you
Yeah.
can invite a someone that's really interested to learn how you do your processes or run your team? Is there Can you
Mhm.
share that information with someone, or bring in a what do you call like university students or
Oh,
an intern? Yeah, could you
yeah.
bring in an intern for a few
Right.
months and share your knowledge with
Yeah.
them to
Mhm.
better their life? So
Right.
those are just some examples of it, but I really believe it's what you love to do and then thinking
Mhm.
how you can create a bigger impact with that through the ripples that happen.
Yeah. And it can extend out, like you said, to
Mm.
many different surfaces or many different ripples along that course,
Yeah.
because it can touch, like you said, so many different people. Somebody could be watching
Yeah.
your video on YouTube or Instagram and see something that could spark in them an interest in their own life, which
Yeah.
can,
And that's the thing. We live in this amazing world now with
yep.
technology, and you can put anything out there and like
Right. This is
people
true.
can see it, good and bad. But
Right.
at the same time, it's like I think a lot of people get stuck because they think they have to create this big thing, or it's not
Yeah.
perfect, or their
Right.
message isn't clear enough. But I
Hmm.
tell you, when we started our nonprofit, we didn't talk about it. I didn't share our passion with our other clients or other business friends. And we were in Kenya one day, and one of our of our trips, and
One day.
and one day, and then our director said to us, who sits in our board of directors, he's like, Amy, he's like, how come you and Stu never share what you're passionate about with the nonprofit? Like, we're
Mm,
building schools, you're not sharing it on social media. Like, why are you not talking about it?
right.
And we're like, we don't want people to feel like they have to donate or they
Yeah.
have to give to us or feel bad that they don't know what we're doing. Or that was our answer. And he's just
Yeah.
kind of, he's, do you believe in what you're doing and how you're running your organization and everything you've done?
Hmm.
I'm like, absolutely, 110%.
Right.
We're so proud of it. And
Hmm.
he's by you not sharing, you're robbing the opportunity of somebody else to jump on board or to enjoy that experience.
Hmm.
Because to be, a giver and a taker, they work hand in hand, or to donate and to give back and to help
Right.
others, there's a synergy for both. So I'll never forget that. So then we got back and we're like, oh, maybe we are robbing the opportunity for people to help us.
Yeah.
So we got back and we shared, and it was like doors open and opportunities showed up and more
Boom.
people donated. More
Yeah.
people came to Kenya with us, like more
Right.
people helped build the schools. And I think if we don't share what we're passionate about or what we believe in or what we're going towards, you're not going to attract anybody and no one will ever know. And then you
Right.
miss on the ripple
The ripple
effects
effect.
and like reaching people.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's interesting because we need to show up to be seen, right? So it's like if we don't show people what our passion is, it's like we're robbing ourselves. We're robbing others, but we're
Yeah.
also robbing ourselves of
Yes.
the vision of who our purpose is, our true passion in life. And I think that's
Mhm.
really important to acknowledge that if you have a passion or a purpose, and even it doesn't matter how small it is, if it's important to you, that's what should be important.
Yeah. Number one is yourself. And
Right.
when
Mhm.
you when you're passionate, you're attracting all the right people that you want to attract in your life.
That's so true. When working through the book, how do readers, our listeners have gotten your book and they're like, okay, so how do I work through moving or dreaming their passion to purpose? I think you talked about that a little bit, but how does the book guide people? Because I think that was one of the things you mentioned in the beginning is like you wanted to create something that people could use.
Yes. Yeah. So in the book, I've broken it down. I have a copy too here, but it's broken down into the 7 parts. And I talk right at the start about your possibility and fulfilling you. And an activity that's in there is really, it's like filling your buckets, just making sure
Mm,
what's important to you, not like what's important to your spouse, what's important to your community or your business. It's what's important to you. And that's where your passion lies in there. But and then I go through dreaming big, and I share a couple of things that your listeners might find helpful is through the self-doubt, because I think as we go on this journey of going towards our passions and these bigger dreams, you're going to get the naysayers, you're going to have the
right.
self-doubt, you're going to have the people that'll think you're crazy for leaving the 9 to 5 job or whatever it may be for yourself. And there's a couple of ways I've gotten through that I could share that might be
Yeah,
helpful.
that'd be
Um,
great.
so one is when you come up to self-doubt and you're not sure, because self-doubt, I don't care how many books you've written or how successful you get. I think self-doubt happens to all of us. It's
Hmm.
just a matter of like strategies you use to get through it at that moment or what you
Right.
do. For me, I'm learning to speak, learning to speak publicly more often and speak on stages. I've done it a
Yeah.
lot with my husband, and usually we
Hmm.
do it in a conversational piece together, or I've done it virtually. But I had my first speaking engagement by myself with a PowerPoint just a few weeks ago.
Nice.
And I was
Congrats.
terrified. Like I was like feeling sick and I
Mm.
don't know. And it's my first since COVID. Like this was my first event, for the last couple of years. Not a big event. But something that's been really for help for me for when I came up to that moment is remembering what we've already done.
Mm,
Because I think so many times we forget about what we've already done as an
right.
entrepreneur, forget about the hard times we've already had, or we forget that we've even done it before. Like when I went to speak at that event, I've spoken in front of 4,000 people, 5,000 people. I've like fallen off of a chair in front of people. Like, and I was just like, if I can't stand in front of 80 mom entrepreneurs and share my story. So I think you have to just remember what you've already done,
That's
for sure,
important.
because it is super important. Then another suggestion I would have is make sure you're living your story. And what I mean by that, and what you maybe have heard before, is you've got to make sure that it's your story and not someone else's. So in the book,
Mhm.
I talk about my beautiful friend Alyssa. She was my personal trainer for like 3 years until we moved. And a couple of years ago, I went to her, we were working out, and I said, oh, you should come with me on this trip to Morocco. I'm riding a 50cc, which is like a kid's bike,
Yeah.
across Morocco. I think you should come. You'll really enjoy it. She's, oh yeah, I think that would be so great. And she was so excited. And I'm like, yes, I found somebody else. Like now I have 4 women. And then I went back to work out a couple of days later,
Yeah.
and she's like, Amy, I can't go. And I'm like, what? I'm like, you're 30, like you're a grown woman. What do you mean you can't go?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, my dad says I can't. And I'm just like, oh, and I'm kind of like, okay, like
Right.
and I
Okay.
left, and then
Right.
we came back, and we survived and came back, and we were chatting about it. And she's like, yeah, she's like, I really wish I had gone. And it
Mm,
was so heartbreaking because she wasn't living her true story. She was living the scared, and the fear was coming from her dad, because her
right.
dad is a lovely man, lovely, lovely man. But his version of travel is Florida and Canada, like, or the
Right.
odd place. So that sense of adventure isn't really his thing. And he was
Mm.
terrified for her.
Yeah, he's like, "Don't
And
go. You'll Morocco's not
so
safe," or something.
there's her dad saying, I don't think you should go. And then my dad, I think that's just used to it, and is like, all right, see you later. But it is right.
Exactly.
It's the fear. His fear was coming over onto her and holding
Mm,
her back. And she wasn't that scared about it. She wanted to do it. So
yeah.
in the end, she's now living and missed that opportunity because her dad was scared for her, but
Right.
that wasn't her story. Like,
Yeah, she wasn't living.
her voice and what
Yeah.
she wanted to do. So just remember, I think, as you go through these things, don't let other people's stories come in the way. I know with
Mm,
our little guy we adopted from South Africa, he
mhm.
is turning 8 in January. We
Wow.
adopted him when he was 1, and it was an 8-year adoption journey. Like, we had people tell me that I should have another one of my own. Even my mom and dad were like, maybe you should like adopt domestically if you want to adopt. And we were like, my husband and I were like, no, like we really want to
Right.
do this. But towards the end of the 8 years, you can imagine the self-doubt that was beginning to like creep into my head of, are we doing the right thing? Like maybe we're
Yeah.
not. And but you have to listen to that gut and your inner belief. And
Mm.
the whole time I knew, I'm like, no, I'm like, it's been 7 years, but I know it'll happen. Like we will adopt.
We
And
can
we
do
did.
it. Yeah.
And like Sam is in our life, and it's Sam, which is Stu for my husband's name, Amy for my name, obviously, and then Marla, which is my daughter's name. And
Oh,
that's
that's so
his
sweet.
biological name, right?
Yeah.
And like, how crazy is that? And it's because it was meant to be, and that was our
Yeah.
story. And I could have listened to all the naysayers and all the people doubting our adoption journey and saying it
Mm.
wasn't a good idea.
Right.
But then we wouldn't have had Sam, and it wouldn't have been that way. So
Yeah.
just make sure your story definitely is your story and not somebody else's.
That's so true. Living
Mhm.
from your story. And it can be hard sometimes, like you said, when you're in that cloud of naysayers to like, oh, am I
Yeah.
doing the right thing? That self-doubt can totally creep up. And if as we're moving into 2022, like how can our listeners, if they're feeling stuck in that kind of like naysayer or they're stuck with their passion, what are some of the tips that they can use to really make their dream their reality for 2022? Because people, including myself, have already
Yeah.
started making my dream plans for, of course, for 2022. And what are your tips in the book that really help to guide the dream making, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So something I talk about in the book too is what my husband and I do every year, and we'll do it this year, is take a day and usually it's January 1st. My New Year's aren't as exciting as they were in, in my 20s, 30s. So I'm more, so we usually get a hotel room and we sit down and we look at the year. So I encourage people to take time to sit down and with your spouse or your significant or by yourself and plan. And I know that sounds daunting, but what we have realized, and not just running multiple companies, but life in general, if you don't
Right.
put those things on the calendar, it'll get filled with everything else.
Right.
So what we do is I have these great static calendars. You don't even have to use tacks or tape, like they just cling to your wall forever.
Nice. That's great.
And I'm very visual, so I like to see the whole year in front of me
Yeah.
or each quarter so I can see. And then the first thing we put on our calendar is our goals, our dreams. So if you're looking at planning, then you want to do more something you're passionate about, then make sure you write each month what day you're going to do it, put it on the calendar and set it. So it's what's important to myself and to my husband.
Right. Number
and
one.
what's important to our family. So we do, well, hopefully this year we're planning to do like a family trip.
Oh, nice.
So we put first us, and that's for me, it's my passion of travel. So it's a trip for mom with her friends or by myself.
Right.
And then our family trips. And then work obligations and work things, they come third. So they're quite far down on the calendar. So when you're planning your year and you're thinking about the passions that you want to jump into, look at the whole year and write down what month you're going to focus on for each thing. So maybe January is just going to be about researching your passion or different things you can do with your passion. And then February is picking one of those things. Don't be hard on yourself and try and get it all done in January. Like
no,
maybe
not all in January.
Get January the theme of just discovery, right?
Right. Yeah.
And looking at what's possible with things that you want to do, and then make February your planet month where you pick one of those things that you're going to do.
Right.
You can have two. And maybe what I'll send over to you, I was just thinking as I'm sharing this, I have a whole guide for planning that out. So getting your passion and breaking it down to small things and then putting it on the calendar and brainstorming with how it can look too. But I'll send that over to you and we can put that on the notes too.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, that's perfect
helpful
for 2022. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I've been growing with my vision and purpose over the past couple of years. I've been moving into making January just like a restorative month for myself. And I used to be like pushed so hard, like I get to get everything done in January, plan everything out. And now I'm like, the first 2 weeks, I don't want to do anything. I just want to work on myself, not work. I don't like to say that word. I like to enjoy myself, enjoy like life and recharge after the year and set the intention for how I want the year to be, like physically and emotionally and spiritually, not just I'm going to go right into it and everything's going to work in the beginning of the year. So
you know, what's funny? It's like we connect with like how we feel during a moment. So it was funny because today I got back on the Peloton bike for the first time in a month. And so Stu and I just got back from a trip to Vermont where we climbed a mountain 17 times, which is like the equivalent of Mount Everest.
Wow.
So I did this crazy endurance, 36 hours of hiking.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
We did a spa after we relaxed. We came home and I haven't touched the bike. I've been walking my kids to school. Like I've been walking, but I haven't been on the bike.
You're
my
like, I
last
need a break.
ride was an hour. Like I was in amazing shape, and I know I haven't lost all of it, but it's been a month. But then today I was still in my hat. I was still in my pajamas and my sweater that I have my pajamas on, my sweater, my workout pants, my coat. I walk the kids to school and I come back and I'm like, I'm going to get on the bike. And in that moment, I didn't think about, I don't have my sports bra on. I don't have my equipment on. I'm like, I'm just going to get on the bike. And I'm so glad I did because I got on the bike and I connected again with how I felt on the bike. And that's all I needed. And then I got off and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go again because I had that connection with how I felt. In that moment of inspiration, I was like, so I'm on there on the bike and my husband's Instagramming me. I'm like, winter hat, pajama top, sweater, no, and my tights and these big socks. But I knew if I didn't get on, or I've got to get on again, I
Right.
didn't. And then I connected with that feeling. And it's the same with how I started the nonprofit. It's
Mm.
was that moment of inspiration on a couch watching Oprah's Big Give. And
Right.
we started our nonprofit from that moment of inspiration. And it's
Hmm.
so important for us to grasp that moment and move on to that. And then at the same time, honor your body when you're not feeling it. Don't
Hmm.
push it either. But if
Right.
there's a moment that hits and you're like, yeah, let's do it, then you got to take some step toward it, because
Yeah,
then
this
you
is true.
connect for sure.
Yeah, take
Yeah.
advantage of that feeling, trust your feeling, like it being
Mhm.
that inspirational moment. Yeah, instead
Yeah.
of it's great to plan, but at the same time, you can feel let down sometimes if you don't follow through with your plan. So having the inspiration guide you can sometimes be that like catapult, or that, like you were talking about earlier, like listening to the person that said you should go back and talk about the nonprofit. That was like an
Mhm.
inspirational moment that like changed the pivot of change, probably how the
Yeah.
nonprofit was functioning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah.
when you're identifying and acknowledging some places of stuckness, how can then you make those areas like blockages, so to speak, like shift and move? Can you talk about that from your book perspective?
Yeah. One of the tricks that I like to do, and it's just reframing things, right?
Mm.
Oftentimes we talk about this a lot with our daughter, because sometimes we've made them, we're trying to build more resilience. So I'm making her
Yeah.
walk to school,
Hmm.
and she could take a bus, but we turned
Right.
down the bus, and the bus
Nice.
and her friends pass her, and she's like, hi. And it's like, oh, we're
Oh,
the walking family. My mom makes me
right.
walk.
You're like,
But
how's it going?
it's she'll complain about it. And then
Hmm.
I'll be like, but Marla, think of all the exercise you're getting to be a better horse rider, because she
Right.
rides 3 times a week at the barn. And I'm
Nice.
like, this is building your leg strength. Like,
Hmm.
it's reframing it from being a negative experience to what could it be like? Like, instead of asking, ask yourself, how can I make this better? How is this better for my body? Like, just changing the stories that we tell ourselves and reframing
Hmm.
those words, I think is so important, because often it can be just one or two switches to how,
Mm.
right, how we're
Yeah.
looking at it. So reframing it definitely is one tip to remember. And I give a few on within the book. There's a few more examples of
Hmm.
how to, like, another one I share is how, so for example, you write down what you're struggling with.
Yeah.
Say, I don't have a big enough social circle to share my passion or share my purpose or share my
Hmm.
business with. But then you write down next to that some actionable things. So what are you going to do? So
Oh,
I'm going
yeah.
to connect with 10 people this month to help grow my circle. Put an action step next to what you're struggling with and list them that way. And then it
Hmm.
becomes less overwhelming and more manageable, because you could reach out to 10 people and to help grow, right? Or
Right.
it's not such a big thing. It's like when we climbed the mountain, it was like we had to climb it 17 times. And
Hmm.
like you would go up and we'd just be like, one more climb, one more
Right. One
climb.
more.
So it's like just one more
Yeah.
thing that you can do to get closer to your goal.
I love that. And I like how you talk about that reframing piece. And when you have an interesting way from what you're saying is to reframe the wording. So maybe if you're feeling stuck in an area in your vision planning
Mhm.
or your passion, reframing that wording so that you can see it in a different aspect.
Yeah. Asking yourself, what does this make possible? What does it
Mhm.
make possible right now for me, instead of complaining about it or not sure? It's like, what opportunities does this bring for me at this moment in time?
And how far do you look out for when you're looking at that vision, and that if
Yeah.
you want to be in the moment, do you want to plan like a year out, 3 years out? What is, attainable so that you don't feel blocked? Because I think some people like feel overwhelmed by that. Like, oh my God, 5 years. For me, I love that part of it. But I know that some people, they just feel like it just doesn't feel, it feels so far away that
Yeah.
it feels unreachable.
Yeah. No, I think there's two things. I think the first thing is there's definitely excitement in planning that big picture, right? Like in
Hmm.
planning, I was talking to my friend that I'm working with, my Lady Strength brand today, and we are talking about just brainstorming some of these big ideas, right? We're
Yeah.
nowhere near these big ideas. Exciting to think about that big picture. I think you
Mhm.
definitely have to spend time thinking about that because
Right.
it creates excitement and energy and like where you want to go. But then that's like the far out goal. But then you got to bring it back to then think, like you were saying, there's nothing wrong with planning the next 3 months.
Mhm.
What could you do in the next 3 months to move forward and make some
Yeah.
progress? There's slow progress, even if it's slow, it's still progress. You're still you're
Right.
still going forward.
Yeah.
So it's instead of, I do think you should think about what you want long term and envision it
Mhm.
and have fun creating it. But
Yeah.
when it comes to planning, especially at the beginning, like just do a quarterly. Like oftentimes we did that actually the other day with something we're doing is just looking at the first quarter for next year and
Mhm.
then going. And I have
Right.
one staff that's helping me in the lady strength business. And I've been able to give her some more activities and things to do. And I'm not thinking beyond the first quarter. Like I'm just
Right.
getting through the first quarter because then that seems attainable. I'm like, I can do that and I can fit in here and I can work on this here and get this little chunk of time done. And then I
Mhm.
just think naturally as you grow a business and you're able to take some staff on and it grows, then you have the capacity to start thinking maybe for a year plan or something like
Right.
that. But I think it should be roughly there, but you don't
Right.
have to have, I don't know, I don't think you have to have everything figured out. I
Not in
remember it's
concrete.
no, like it's funny because my husband went to university for business
Mhm.
and we joke now that he uses some of the stuff he learned, but not
Right.
really. And
Yeah,
it's
the
like
skills are
they talk
there,
about
but
having these big corporate plans and like their company does very well and they do have plans, but
right.
it's not like so like it's not so heavy. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
yeah.
it's, and that's the beauty with entrepreneurship too. I think you can, at the beginning, you can move a lot faster and make decisions a lot faster than when
Mhm.
you're a much bigger company where you have a
Right.
lot of people to go through. But yeah, it's definitely just look in the first quarter, plan the
Mhm.
first quarter, and then have some success and then move forward. But have fun creating the big dream.
Right. Yeah, have fun. That's really key. I love that. And for me, I find it fun to look back like on something that I created a vision for like 5 years ago. Like, did I create it?
Yeah.
Where am I at with it? Did it totally veer off into another course? So I think it is fun to be loose about that, like really like long-term goal, because it totally changes all the time. But there
Oh,
might be like that passion and purpose is still like the guide, right?
yeah, there's always some common threads, I think. Like when I look
Mhm.
back at my childhood, I was organizing summer camps even when I was a kid. And
Mm.
I remember hiring my brother to record it on those big VHS videos. And then I sold the recordings to the camp, to the parents as like
Oh, how
an
fun.
upsell. It's like you do these different things, then I think there is always a similar one common thread that seems to come
Right.
through.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just never know. There's so much opportunity and doors
Mhm.
open when you
Right.
start taking action. So
Yeah, following your intuition, like you talked
mhm.
about earlier, for sure. And because that can guide you in a way that you might never have realized, like, oh, wow, I met that person. And if I wouldn't have gone to, I don't know what, that event or something, maybe that
Yeah,
person wouldn't have been there and
yeah,
changed the
exactly.
trajectory.
Yeah.
In your book, in chapter 3, which is one of my favorite chapters, of course, because it's the brain. I love how you talk about feeding your brain and building that healthy foundation. And can you talk a little bit about that? What do you mean by that? And why is
Yeah.
that aspect of the brain so important when it comes to cultivating your passion?
Yeah. I think that's where I spoke about Stu and I when we were younger, right? With the,
I think
yeah.
so.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you rewind a bit when I was still teaching and my husband and I were together, he, for some reason, I don't know how some people are wired differently, but he would always listen to tapes. So he would always listen to
Cassette
Tony
tapes.
Robbins, old cassette, yeah, cassette tapes, seriously, cassette tapes and like CDs. We had the van with the 12 CD player or whatever, but he would always listen to leadership tapes or
Yeah.
business tapes and we'd be driving in the car and he would be listening to that. And then I would be listening to music on my iPod and or then we would go to bed at night and I would read John Grisham and
Mhm.
Danielle Steele novels and romance novels. And he's reading all these other
Leadership.
books.
Yeah.
Yeah. And about business. And I used to think like, probably went on for a couple of years. I was like, you're crazy. That stuff is just so boring. What are you doing? And like, so we would, and he never tried to, he's like, yes, you read what you love. I'll read what I love. And,
Right. Yeah.
but then I was in this moment of teaching and I came home from a really bad day, came home and I looked at his books and I'm like,
Hmm.
he's got something happening. Like
Right.
we're building this company together, but he was very much the front of it. And I
Mhm.
was more admin stuff. And so I picked up one of the books and I realized that was when things started to change for me because
Mm.
there's nothing wrong with fiction books. Absolutely not.
Right. You got to have that
But
part of your brain.
but you have to be intentional about what you're listening to and who
Mhm.
you're talking to and who you surround yourself with, because all that stuff, you just need to feed your brain with good things and good thoughts,
Mm.
and you
Yeah.
need to challenge the way that you think. You need to think outside the box and think differently. And the only way we're going to be challenged to think a little differently is by really being mindful about what we're listening to and what our podcasts are about and what books I'm deciding to read. And I
Mhm.
picked up, I think it was The Secret was my first one. But
Mhm.
then I got into just Maxwell, I think his last name was, and John
Mhm.
Dwyer. And I just started Dwayne Dwyer. I
Dwayne
just
Dwyer.
started
Mhm.
reading, and it was like all of a sudden it made me think about things a little differently. And
Mhm.
it was like there's more possibilities that are out there. And like how I looked at one situation after reading a book, I look at it again and I'm like, well, I could look at that a little differently. And
Mm.
maybe that isn't such a big deal or it isn't such a big problem. And how you looking at how you handle situations and and just how to manage relationships better. And I don't know, there's like people use, and I did think self-development books were boring, but they're not. Like if you find the right author and the stories
Right.
that they have, you can really connect with their stories, and you learn so much. And now with audiobooks, like you can go on walks and listen to an audiobook, you can get
Mhm.
a podcast and listen to a great podcast and do it that way. But you really have to pay attention to what you're filling your brain with, like
Yeah.
what you're looking at, what you're hearing, like just everything. Because even the news, like I read MSN like in the mornings or a
Yeah.
news station, but we don't really watch a lot of the news because
Right.
it's for us, it's all negative. And like I
Right. It's
like to know what's
depressing.
happening in the world. But
Yeah.
if you're sitting there watching CNN and or I don't know, or some station, like we don't watch too
Yeah.
much TV, but it can really shape your thoughts. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's not in a positive way. So by just reading books and paying attention to that, I think is super important.
So feeding your brain things that are actually going to help shift your brain for opening to a new thought process
Yeah.
or reprogramming your brain for a new
Yeah.
process.
And I think too, it also challenges the way that you think, right?
Mhm.
Like that maybe challenges an old mindset that you have that you
Mhm.
don't even realize you've
Right.
adapted from somebody else, but it's always been your mindset. But
Yeah.
I think it's healthy to challenge somebody's mindset on something because life is changing. It changes constantly. And I
Mhm.
think we always have to be open to a new way of looking at things and doing things and going through life.
Yeah, totally. What fun book are you reading now?
You know
Besides your
what?
own book. Right.
No, we were reading a pair. I don't know if it's here. Yeah, this is what I'm actually reading right now. It's more a parenting. We're all about 10 rules for resilience.
Oh, nice.
And it's
Yeah.
not for this one's more of a parenting book, and it talks about
Yeah.
mental toughness for families. And
Yeah.
because if anything, like our kids are very fortunate of growing up in an amazing life that was very different from when I grew up. But at the
Mhm.
same time, we're always installing like giving back and kindness. But things I think are given to kids so quickly these days, and
Right.
trying to install resilience and patience and
Yeah.
more that kind of thing. So we're always trying different parenting hacks or books
Hmm.
as well to raise the best kids that we can.
Yeah. We live in a different world than when we grew up, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And building the resilience to help them to be able to bounce back from and define their own purpose and passion. And because I think there's so much media out there that can define our children in different ways. And so I like what you said too about I don't watch the news myself either. I find it too, it fills my brain with things that I don't have space for. Is a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
want,
that's right. You want to
yeah,
fill it with good, like you want to fill it with the things that is like good for you and
right.
positive, just intentional things. And I think we do have to be intentional now more than ever in what we're letting into our
Hmm.
life and into our brain and into our
Right.
mind.
Yes. Our body is our temple. Right.
Yes.
In chapter 9, one of the aspects that you discuss is the relationship we have with money. And I'd love for you to talk about that as an aspect of passion. Because I know you talked about in the beginning a little bit about how you don't have to have this massive amount of money to make your passion, but what
Yeah.
is that relationship with money in regards to that passion and purpose? And when you are like visualizing a bigger purpose, a bigger passion, and
Mhm.
you do have to have that money come in to help support it, how can you make your shift happen if you're, I don't know, if you're stuck in, oh, I'll never have enough money, or how can I make people understand my vision?
Yeah. So for us, like, it's funny, the relationship with money, I think, is so important. Like, from our kids now at their age, we teach them to give and to save and to spend. And there's nothing wrong with spending your money. There's nothing wrong with saving it, which you should. And there's nothing wrong, with giving it back. And whenever
Hmm.
you get money, you need to do those three things with it: to give and
Yeah.
save and spend. And when it comes to money for us, for a long time, particularly Stu, I think, like, when he grew up, it sounds like when he was little. So like when he was in university, he was offered this amazing job right out of university. He was recruited because he's very talented. And
Mhm.
he turned it down before he even started. So he resigned, and his parents were like, "Are you crazy?
What
Like,
are you
this is
doing?
perfect job. You got a car, it's paying you more than both of us make." And he's like, "I don't want to work for anybody." So he
Yeah.
turned it down and he went to work from his parents' basement and started his first business, but he kept hitting like a ceiling. And every time he would make 300,000 a year, he would start not returning calls and start almost self-sabotaging his
Mm,
success. And
yeah.
well, our success, because we were together at that point and we're about
Right.
any would like come back down, and he wouldn't call people back. And then we talked about it quite a bit, and we realized that he was feeling guilty for making
Mm,
that money. And he grew up, and I did too. We both grew up where families, they worked two or three jobs, worked hard all the time. And here Stu was making, and both was making more than their parents had ever made in the
mhm.
first year. And so for a
Yeah.
couple of years, it was like up, down, up, down, up, down. We never really went up.
Plateaued and
And
went up.
no, and then we went to one of our trips to Kenya. We were talking to the community and talked about how much a salary is for a teacher. Now, our organization doesn't support teacher salaries. We partner with the government. So the government provides the teachers and the
Yeah.
principals and all that stuff. But we asked, like, how much would a regular teacher get paid? And they said $100 a month. And at that time, Stu had just started Wishlist Member, which was his first company for creating membership software.
Hmm.
And he was just, so if I sold 2 membership licenses, that would pay for one teacher's salary. And we were like, yeah. And he's, so if I sold all these licenses, then I could have
Hmm.
all these teachers.
Yeah.
And like, yeah. And that was like a moment for us in that, realizing the more money we have, the more impact we can make in this world.
Yeah.
Like,
So
money is
true.
not a bad thing. Money is
Right.
an amazing thing. Like, you can do
Yeah.
so much
It's so
good with
fun.
money. It only exemplifies who we are as individuals. At that point, then we went back, and from then, like, it just continued. It's gone up year after year in different things
Yeah.
we've done. But it's all come back to that healthy relationship with money and knowing that we can have more impact with money. And then also knowing, so how in North Results, which is Stu's bigger company with his business partners, they have interlaced our charity. So they donate our overhead for the nonprofit every year.
Mm-hmm.
So and they get the community involved and they get their employees involved, and
Mm-hmm.
like it becomes a community goal.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it's not just Stu excited about building schools in Kenya, it's the whole team that's excited
Everybody.
about the bigger purpose. So I
Yeah.
think it's knowing that money isn't a bad thing, but then also incorporating that bigger purpose behind your mission with your staff or with your community so they can come on board and support it.
Oh, yeah, totally. I love that. And it's true. It's like we need to have the money to fuel, like money's just fuel. And it shouldn't be in a way that impacts us from not fulfilling our deeper passion and purpose, especially when
Yeah.
we're moving into helping others. That's when it's such a huge deal, I think, for a visionary, an entrepreneur, or
Yeah.
somebody that's wants to help in the health industry, having their particular vision, like maybe if they're suffering from an autoimmune disease or something, and they're like, if I could help other people to move out of that particular disease, what would that look like? And so there's so many different ways we can, and it's just money's just energy. This is an exchange of energy back and forth. And I love what you said about creating that community piece, because then people can stand behind you from the community, and the community is endless, right? We can grow and grow. So I
Well,
love
people
that.
just they want to feel part of something bigger. We all do, towards something where we want to go. So I think thinking that giving back and making more money, but knowing that when they make more money, it affects, grows, obviously helps their families, but it also helps somebody else too that they don't even know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about the village impact. And what about the legacy piece? I know you mentioned that in your book.
Yeah.
Why is that piece, do you think, is so important about creating the passion to purpose, to creating this legacy?
Yeah. So it's funny because legacy and impact, people, I think, often shy away because they think it's such a big word, right? Or they're
Right.
like, oh, wow, legacy is so huge. But it really comes back to what we spoke about at the beginning. And it's naming a classroom or naming a building after yourself is phenomenal. That's great. But to me, a legacy, that's not a full legacy. That's a legacy to me is those little things that we do every day that then lead up to this down the 15, 20, 30 years down the road. Because
Right.
we're starting to build our legacy from right now. Like tonight, every day you're building your legacy. It's those little things that we do that leads up to that. And I just think it's important for everyone to always think about that, because our little decisions that we make can have a big impact on somebody's life, no matter, how small, how big they are. And it's not about one big generous act of kindness. It's about a lifetime of little choices that make a difference.
That's so true. Yeah. And so the legacy can then be like interwoven into the passion, the purpose, the vision. It's all like the whole picture.
Yeah, it's like the end. And I'm still working, like that's, we built our school now. We have 15 we're building our 15th school right now. I don't have plans to stop. And I never thought we have 15 schools helping 8,000 people. And it's crazy. Like we've raised $8 million, and it's, but I don't have, our plans are to keep going and keep helping and keep
Yeah.
learning and growing together. And it's a legacy is a thing that's always changing and moving, and you're adding to and making more, but it really is your actions every day at the end of the day, because you
Right.
become known for something. You become, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm known for being the nonprofit, but then I'm also known for being this crazy traveling lady that does really insane things that people are like, you do. But it's
Yeah.
like you do these things over time and you become known for certain things you do. But it's all it's how intentional we are about taking those little actions to then having that impact down the road.
That's so key. Yeah, I love that, having that intention. And that like the theme of all of your book and with
Mhm.
everything we've been talking about today. It's really the intention behind everything that you do.
Yeah. And being,
Mhm.
yeah, just being intentional with your time, like being
Mhm.
intentional with your relationships and your family and making the best of what you have and paying it forward.
Love it. Love it, Amy. Thank you so much. It's been so fun to have you on the show today. I have one last question, then we're going to wrap up and talk about
Yeah.
how people can find you, find your
Yeah.
book. And so if you had, this is a funny question to ask you, but this is, if you had,
Now I'm worried. What are you
I
going to
know,
ask? What
no,
are you
it's just
going to
funny. If you had an unlimited budget, what would you do to make the biggest impact on the planet? I mean, I think,
What
and I
would I
ask
do?
all my guests that, but it's like funny because you're making such an impact. But if you had an unlimited budget, what would you do to make the biggest impact on the planet right now?
I would continue to, but I would finish all the schools that I want to build. And then I would go out from Kenya and go into some other countries. People
Mm,
often ask if we are going to go into other countries, but it's budget, but then it's also relationships and connections with people in other
right.
countries. But
Yeah.
I would finish building all of the schools that we want to in partnership with the government for sure.
Oh, nice. Great. I think you're definitely going to do that one.
And then take everyone on a holiday, give everyone a chance to go on holiday wherever they want to for a week.
I love that one. Okay, I'm definitely down. I love it. Tell our listeners how they can find you, best way to follow you on social media. And then we're also going to give away one copy of your book when people listen to the podcast and the first person that direct messages you. So let's make sure we talk about where they can message you.
Yeah. So if you direct message me, I'm more on Instagram and Facebook. So you
Mhm.
can check me out on Instagram and it's Amy Dow Mclaren and send me a DM. And the first person that sends me a DM and says, where you heard this conversation, I will send you a copy of my book, Passion to Purpose, in the mail. So send me a DM and you could be the first one to win a copy of my book.
Yay. Awesome. And how can people buy the book? Where can your website or Amazon, where are you doing your
Yeah.
main
So
book sending?
absolutely. So the books are in most bookstores, so Barnes and Noble. If you're Canadian, they're in Indigo. But you can also get them online at Amazon. And then also passiontopurposebook.com has it as well.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks so much, Amy. It's been a joy to have you on this show and learn about your passion and help our listeners to kindle passion within themselves.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.